So today's episode, I'm going to be talking to Dino Baptiste. Dino, how are you?
Hello, V. I'm fine, thank you.
Good. It's good. We were just sort of, before we pressed record, we were just trying to work out when we last saw one another, and it was a long time ago. So
I think about 4 or 5 years, I think.
More than that, mate. It was a long time ago, I think. I think we might be talking about 10.
I think I did about 3 or maybe 2 of those blues.
You did? Yeah. We did some blues camp stuff. But it was good. So, mate, my traditional first question is, what'd you do?
As of last year, I was 31 years in the music business professionally. My mainstay now is basically piano player, keyboard player. That's Hammond organ, keyboard as well. Singer, entertainer. My forte has really been my blues and boogie woogie stuff. That's what I do best. But in order to earn my bread and butter, and what, as I was saying before we started live recording, was what was 270 gigs a year, was probably a third of that was what I like doing. Another third's the pub and club stuff, your bread and butter stuff, and then you've got your private and corporate stuff. But as the whole thing of COVID is such a long subject, but yeah, like most professional musicians, whether touring or not, I've lost a hell of a lot of work. When you're a piano player and singer, you're able to do gigs probably that even a guitarist probably wouldn't want to do or wouldn't be asked to do. Did a lot of garden parties, a lot of stuff like that. So from June, I was probably one of the few who was working up until things opened up for the summer. And I also, apart from that, I keep my profile up as well. So I've been in the studio putting together show reels and videos for my band, Night Train. And any other work I do is with other musicians, primarily with Dana Gillespie, who's the old blues diva. So I've been with her since 97, 25 odd years or so, and that's been good as well. So that tends to keep my blues and boogie profile working with her, you know.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
So let's take you back to the beginning then. When did you realise that you like playing?
It's kind of weird. So basically, my background, just before I come on to that, Baptiste is it's a Portuguese name. Right, but my parents originate from India, but they're that Anglo-Indian thing. So, yeah, so there's about 2 generations out there, and the jazz scene in India in the 50s was really big. My grandfather was a sax player, so he was playing until he was 85 years old on the cruise ships and everything like that.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and then all that rock and roll, boogie woogie, good time swing, bebop stuff, I was brought up like with that. So when my parents in 1974 were having a house party, and there I was, 7 years old, I'd be in the party DJing and doing listening to all this like music and stuff like that. Yeah. That good time like music, it was always in my blood, Vic. And you know, right from the age of 2, I was playing. However, when I went to school, probably ages of around, say, 10, 11, 12, my parents bought me a keyboard, and I noticed that I wasn't playing sport at school. I was always in the music room. This went on till about 14, 15 years old. And just every day, that was my own self-appointed apprenticeship. I can't read a note of music, always played by ear. And I remember actually taking my school exams. Back then it was CSCs and O levels. Yeah. And I remember the professor from the London College of Music sat down by the music teacher, and I couldn't read the first note. And he said, well, what have the boy done for the past 2 years, you know? And I was just bored. I've always wanted to do like my own thing. Time went by. 16 years old, I joined my first band in Bracknell in Berkshire. You know, the classic aspiring to fame and glory. We all thought we'd be the next big thing. That went on from 16 till about 21. Started building up a good sort of network. And in those days, 18, 19 years old, you weren't online looking at YouTube. You were actually getting on a bus and going to a gig after work. And if you missed the last train, that was it. But the passion was to just go to pubs, meet all these different people. Some of them are still alive, some of them are dead. But it was a great scene, the early 80s and stuff like that. And this was going on around 22. My playing ability, everything was there, but I was stuck in a hole because I had a daytime job. My mother worked in the airline business. I started working in travel agency work, normal 9 to 5 thing. But that wasn't really my vocation. I knew I had to go like beyond that. And literally, we've got half the family living in Melbourne, in Australia. And my mum said to me, do you know what? I think you need to take all your gear, your equipment, to Australia, go on a working holiday, which you're not meant to do, but I did that, and see what happens. I ended up going for a year, stayed there for 4 years, didn't come back. And that was it. Within 6 months of arriving, May 1989, I turned professional by October. And I've actually kept a journal of every gig I've done since that first professional gig in October until today.
Wow.
And and I've got every gig like sort of listed, and it was crazy, in those days you're playing, I think I got like $100, which was like about 50 quid back then to do these gigs, but it got bigger and bigger and bigger. By 24 I was touring and learning about life on the road, which was quite an experience. Meeting all these different like musicians. I ended up playing with Lulu, supported Billy Joel, Alana Miles, all these great artists. And I just took it. I wasn't in awe. I was just literally going through it because you just, it's one of those things where you just you learn about life as you're going along rather than getting too excited about it. And when the opportunities came, I just sort of jumped in it. However, my visa expired, had to come back home. By about 92, I had, thereabouts, I think, came back. I left as an amateur and I came back as an amateur. I lost the plot for about 18 months. And by 93, 94, you probably remember the old Melody Maker newspaper. And if you wanted to join a band, you put your ad in there.
Yes,
exactly. And I remember just like answering an ad, met these guys. I didn't like what they were doing. And they said, well, Dino, why don't you front the band? And 93 to 94, I had my own like blues band, living at my parents, and started gigging. And as these early years went by, the networking got bigger and bigger and bigger. And by 97, when I met Dan Gillespie, I'd established my own name, and that's it. And it just went from that. Carried on like running the band. But then as my piano playing got more extensive, I was able to do like piano bars, stuff like that. So I had 2 different sets. I had a classic like piano bar cover set, all your Elton John, Van Morrison, Billy Joel, but I had the blues stuff as well. And that's what's kept my sanity, because I'm sorry to say this, but there's a lot of wedding bands out there. The bad habits you can pick up from being a cabaret come wedding player, it's terrible. You've got to keep on top. What I say is you got to keep your chops in trim.
Yeah.
And I was able to actually do that, and I would never ever fall back. I think my pride and my OCD about my playing is, you've got a reputation, and if you start playing like Merv and the Magic Tones, you remember in the Blues Brothers, don't go changing, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I know. This is there's a lot of stuff there which is really good. I pick up on the Melody Maker thing. That is something that happens in the interviews that I've done.
Yeah,
it comes up a lot. The Melody Maker adverts, right? And how many people that was their way into getting gigs and all.
Yeah, totally. And you had all the ads at the back if you wanted to buy a keyboard, and all those old stores in Denmark Street in central London. Half of them they've all gone. Places like Rod Argent's, Macari's, Tin Pan Alley. And I remember actually, when I was working in that travel agency stuff from about 18 till 22, I was in Soho Square, where all the actual movie the film companies are. And I had my copy of the Melody Maker, and I think I was on a lunch break, and I was crossing the road, and walking towards me was Paul McCartney. And he came up to me. I remember, I came up to him actually, and I had my copy of the Melody Maker, and I said, "Mate," I said, "any chance of an autograph?" And he took that, and he signed it. And it's long. I think I was going out with a girl called Lisa, and I was 21, I think it was, maybe slightly earlier, and I gave it the paper with the autograph on there as a gift. But yeah, in those days, again, you could just see people walking around.
Yeah.
You know, people like Duran Duran and all these different bands from that era. And it wasn't the same as what it is now. You know, I blame the whole thing on Simon Cowell. And the reason why I say that is because if
it's not his fault, it's worth blaming it on him anyway.
The minute he started Pop Idol and X Factor and all those reality things, that's what kicked off the whole thing about when you do a wedding today. All right, mate, my best mate's a singer, can you get up and sing? Because everyone thinks that they can do it. That's another story. The whole reality thing, it does my head in when you've got these young kids saying, this is the end of it. I've got to get the audition. And try doing not 30 years, try do 5 years of hard graft on the road, and then you'll know what it to be a working musician.
Okay, let's pick up on that, because it's good, because you've managed to sort of really...
I love talking, Vic.
You've done, you sort of laid out how you did things. There's a few things I want to ask you, actually, from a point of view of, because this podcast is about creativity and stuff. You're playing, I mean, for the people who've not heard you, you are a wicked piano player, right?
Thank you.
And your sort of technique is, it's very, how can I put this? Blistering.
I call it
is a good word.
Unorthodox.
Yes, but the point is, most of the really good players that I've interviewed, from obviously a lot of guitarists and whatever, I would say that a lot of them are unorthodox, and they are like big names. That's not the point, is it? It's really what you get out there in sound.
But it's from here.
Yes, absolutely. Totally agree. So, what were your influences?
I was brought up on all this old time, not the old boogie woogie blues like musicians, not your
not the palm tops.
Yeah, I was brought up more, probably about another from the 30s, probably about another 20 years on. Yeah. So your Little Richards, your Fats Domino, so it's more the entertainment thing, but that straight ahead blues, rock and roll, 12-bar kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And my style was really, I mean, just sidetracking. I got my first album from my dad in 1976. It was a blues and boogie woogie album by a guy called Vince Weber, or Vince Weber, as the German name was. He was from Hamburg. There's a really probably world famous current boogie woogie piano player from years gone by, is a guy called Axel Swingenberger. Axel Swingenberg and Vince were good mates. And this album was called The Boogeyman. And my dad bought this for me. And I remember bringing this album home on a record player, might I say, in those days after school, playing it over and over again. And I just learned to play these styles. If you listen to my style now and listen to an album of Vince Weber, you'll find that the way I play is pretty much like that. But to answer your question, the back of my mind, it was always those more, not contemporary players, but those players from the 50s. Yeah. And I just love, I can't explain it. I'm a real lover of shuffles, blues shuffles, the Texas shuffle, not your Stevie Ray Vaughan stuff, but before that, Good Time Swing. Who was the other guy who did Let the Good Times Roll? Louis Jordan.
Yeah, Louis Jordan. Yeah.
Stuff like that. So you could say, if anyone, Ray Charles is probably like my biggest thing. I don't play like him, I don't sing like him, but when I do play his songs as covers, he's very much up there. And very much part of it. So you could probably say the good old rock and roll greats, the bebop stuff, the swing stuff, and then I've incorporated my own style, which and I don't read a note of music. I play by ear. So what I might play one night is different to the other night.
Yeah.
But I think, and I always say to the younger musicians, especially who are working with my band, is take your time. It's not a case of playing as many notes as possible.
Nah.
It's all about soul, groove,
Yeah.
feel, tempo, and what you feel. And like I said, I mean, I was in the studio like yesterday. I had a massive hangover from my birthday on the Tuesday, but I was in the studio. I did like what I did, and it came from there rather than thinking. Wasn't even thinking about the chords. They were straight ahead tracks that I was playing for another band. And but yeah, I think that good time, feel good music from the 50s, but Ray Charles, Little Richard, and Jerry Lee and Fats Domino, they're my four main guys.
Yeah, cool.
And you know what as well, that people find my taste in music really, really weird. 1 minute I'm listening to all that old school soulful music, and yeah, on the other hand, mate, I know some people like listening to this podcast when it goes live. It will be more of a case where, what on earth is he on about? Having said that, I could listen to a Harry Styles song. I could listen to an Ed Sheeran song. I could listen to bands like Years and Years, all these up and coming pop bands and what have you. If there's a good like melody there and a good hook, and if I like the way it's been produced, I love it. And I'm not embarrassed to actually say that.
No, I totally agree with you. Because obviously, you know, I teach a lot of kids songwriting, and so you know, you're often sort of looking at stuff that's sort of current, and you know, you get the odd gem coming out. You think that's good. I like that. It's a different sort of. There's a different take on this, and it might not be something I particularly like, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
Out of preference, but that's not the point. It's like anything when you're working, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're often playing pieces of music you don't necessarily like. You wouldn't go home and listen to it, but you're playing it. But you've got to find something in it.
Well, you've got to connect with it, like sort of musically.
Yes.
And I think it's unfair to look. This may sound really, really crap, but look, if there was a Justin Bieber track that came out tomorrow, and if I felt, wow, that's kicking.
Absolutely.
It deserves it, you know. It deserves a good bit of praise.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. So let's get you're saying about Donna Gillespie. How did you meet her?
Dana, my bass player I told you I put my band together in 93, 94, and the bass player, a guy called Adrian Stout, he was playing with a band called the Tiger Lilies, which they've done incredibly well, and he had to leave. He was playing bass with Dana, and he was about to leave, but he said that Dana was looking for a piano player. Now it so happens she was using Dave Robery, who was the keyboard player with the Animals, but the genre of musicians she was using, there was I hasten to say, but there was a drink problem and a lot of things, you know. Dave, who passed away, rest in peace, he was due to get the elbow, and she needed a piano player, someone who could play piano, lots of that boogie woogie stuff, you know, a bit of Hammond organ and what have you. I just went round to her house in South Kensington. I read up on her resume, and Dana had, I mean, to this date, she's recorded 70 albums. She's signed to Ace Records, and her resume was like sort of ridiculous. I mean, she was the backing vocalist with David Bowie, and then she was Marilyn Jesus Christ Superstar. So whilst I didn't know much about her, but when I went for the audition, I got the gig, and but she's into other things, very superstitious and what have you. We both found we were born on the same day. She follows an Indian guru, and with my Anglo-Indian background, there were a lot of things that sort of linked us. But our birthdays together, whilst there's quite an age gap, the similarities were amazing. And and then literally just adding on top of this, which was probably, I mean, like Dan has changed a lot of aspects of my musical career. You know, whilst I do my own thing, I've had opportunity. I've traveled the world with her. I've played some really big gigs. And in 97, when we met in October of that year, she had a really good relationship with Bob Dylan, and Bob came round to our house in October, I remember that year, and said, "Hey, Dana, do you want to join me on the support slots of my stadium tour in the UK?" And she rang everybody up in the band, and it was only 4 gigs. It was Cardiff, Bournemouth. And on the last day of that gig, Bob Dylan's tour manager was Gary Moore's tour manager, and came into the dressing room in Cardiff and said, "Listen, Bob wants you to do the closing show at Wembley Arena tomorrow." And I remember we were going back. Chris Hunt was playing drums in the band then. He was Lonnie Donegan's drummer. And we were driving back in the tour bus, in the minibus, thinking, Christ, who are we going to use on drums? Because this is a great gig. Anyway, Dana rang me the next morning to be at Wembley for the sound check at 4 o'clock. This is October 97, right? I get there, and there's this guy standing in the background, blonde, spiky hair, a long, like leather trench coat.
Yeah, okay.
Looks like Roger. Looks like, what's his name? Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Oh, right, yeah.
Terminator. Turns around and it's Roger Taylor from
Queen.
Roger,
I thought you were going to say that.
Yeah, and he comes out. In those days, it was like Walkmans, and there were 5 songs, and he asked me how the songs go. Blah 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 blah. Did the gig, and that kind of set everything in stone for what was to come for the other years. And through my good friendship with Dana, we're like brother and sister actually, and I've met so many cool people. I mean, she was running the blues festival in Mustique, in the Caribbean, where the Royals would go. Did that for like sort of 20 years, and you were doing that, and you could have anyone standing next to you who's a celebrity. In 2005, Mick Jagger was there. When we got up on stage, that's all on YouTube. If you YouTube Mick Jagger Mustique 2005, and we did 3 tracks, and it's very rare for Mick to get up on stage, and there we are on this Caribbean bar, 35 degrees outside. There should have been 170 people. There was only 500. There was 500 people in the audience, and they were all playing Honky Tonk Woman that I've played 1 billion times at pubs. Yeah. And there was Mick actually doing it.
Yeah.
Went on and on and on, and to this day, like Dana's just recorded her 71st album, and we've got gigs coming up, COVID pending, lots of international work, stuff like that. But she's into her boogie blues stuff, and we worked well. But she likes her musicians to entertain, and that's one trait I'm really proud of. I don't sit behind the piano. I've just got my energy. People say, "Dino, where'd you get it from?" I just want to play,
and
have fun.
So this is an interesting thing. How you were saying about how you met, made that connection, and it was sort of almost a sort of off the cuff type, so and so needs and so that is so common. That happens so often in these conversations. It's not like anybody's planned to do something or.
No. And you know what, Vic? The best opportunities come up by complete surprise.
Totally.
When I was living in Australia, I was doing some recording with an Australian artist, and the producer was the bass player, who's not around anymore as well, but I forget his name now, but he was the bass player with Hall & Oates.
Oh, right.
And he said to me, he was from like New York, and he said, "Hey, Dino, man, you know what?" He goes, "When being a musician, waiting for the opportunities, like being in the bakery." I said, "Well, what are you talking about?" And he says, "When they give you your ticket to get your loaf of bread, if you miss that ticket, you'll miss the boat, you'll miss the opportunity going. You've got to just get in there and take the opportunity." Obviously, as life goes by, your intuition will tell you, is it worth driving from London to Glasgow for an audition when you know that the gig is going to be like rubbish, or it's a complete waste of time? But I totally agree with you on that, and I think every opportunity that I've had in my career has always been taken me by surprise. I have anything that I plan, be it going on a TV reality show, if I ever did that, or audition, whatever, anything planned goes wrong. Anything that I've created, like doing my videos, doing my audio production, you've got to plan that because it needs work and concentration. But to get a gig to play with piano player with Eric Clapton or something like that, those golden opportunities which come along every so often, they catch you by surprise, and that is when it works.
Yes, exactly. So that is, I think, something that obviously young musicians or young artists obviously won't realize, because unless somebody tells them that those things happen like that, because, you know, the way that, because you learnt, like I did, on your own.
Yeah.
Right. Off a record, you know, you listen to whoever it was, you worked it out note for note off the recording. And then you went out and just tried it out, right? That's how we did it. You know, it wasn't like you went college or whatever, right? And but of course now got these kids going to college, going to university or whatever, studying music, and it's almost like they think that the process is being taught to them, that they've just got to follow, you know, which is a mistake. There was one interview I did with somebody who was saying that he went to, I can't remember which college it was, but it doesn't really matter. And he was saying about being taught networking. And he said it was the biggest load of rubbish, really. He said, because it was so false. He said, really, if they just said, look, guys, just go and have a beer with people. Just hang out.
You know what, Vic? I play, sorry to interrupt you, but I play at this, which is still closed at the moment, but at the famous Ain't Nothing But the Blues in Old Compton Street in Soho. It's been there since '93, and I've done some great gigs there. And my first gig there is actually with Dana on the 30th of May, due to, if it all goes to plan. Now, I remember when I was 14, 15, right up, excuse me, up to around like sort of 22, 23, when I was trying to get those breaks, and I'd go to gigs, the band's cooking on stage, and I said, oh man, I'd love to get up and play. Yeah. So what I do, for example, at the blues bar, if there's a guy in the audience, generally if it's a sax player or something like that, or a guitarist, because it's such a small stage, hey Dino, any chance I could get up and play it? Now, normally I would use my intuition, listen to how they talk first before I get them up. But if I feel it, get them up on stage, do a couple of tracks, couple of 12 bars, and generally, if I've got it right, they nail it. I'm currently using this young guy, young lad, guy called Tom Waters, who's son of the famous UK boogie woogie piano player Ben Waters. And Ben and I, we kind of grew up, was roughly the same sort of age. And in February, just prior to like lockdown of last year, this little guy turns up with his saxophone and he says, "Hi, Dino, I'm Ben's son." And I said, "Who?" And I said, "Oh, Ben Waters' son." Yeah, it was Tom Waters. I said, "Listen, man, do you want to get up?" The drummer said to me, "Dino, get this kid up. He's going to nail it." And just going back to what you were saying, you know, about how things can be processed from an academic level at all these colleges and what have you. This was just a young lad come from his halls of residence. He's doing his 3-year course at the Royal Academy. But thankfully, Ben and his parents, old school rock and roll, they brought him up a completely like sort of different way. He got up on stage, set up his sax, brought the bloody house down.
Yeah. And
that's what it was. He just got up and played. Now, that lad was like 19. He's 20 now. And to this day, he plays like as though he's 40 years old, and also has that attitude. Now, it's very rare to find players like that. And as you said, you can literally just come off the conveyor belt and be like sort of processed. Luckily, I think it's good actually for the younger players to be working with the older players to get that. Maybe occasionally get told off for playing too many notes or whatever, but the social media, the YouTube, learning to play note for note like your favorite like musician plays. If I haven't got kids, but if I had a son or a daughter who wanted to play, I would bring them up my way, giving them their own choice on how they want to expand within the sort of musicality of it. But I think the way that everything's brought into play these days, no, I learned the hard way. If I was playing in a band and I didn't do my homework, and I learned, in one instance, I got a smack around the head on stage because I wasn't paying attention, you know, and I was shocked. I was upset. I never did it again.
No, that's right. That's right. I think the thing is, the classic one is you don't get another gig.
Well, that's as well, yeah.
You know, so yeah, it's very important that, and again, you know, because I see this a lot, and it's the sort of, there's almost like an unconscious programming. Well, it is an unconscious programming that's going on with people. You know, like you were saying about what people think that the route in is the sort of reality TV type of
no. Oh, that annoys me.
Which is just bonkers. And but it's also the fact that you know, people think that they can't fail. You know, and you think, well, actually, when you're involved in music, you can easily fail, and the failing is actually sometimes the thing where you learn the lesson that you really need to learn. You know, the type of gigs that you think, no, you got to learn to be able to. How can you put it? It's almost like you were saying about getting a second, like an instinct to the type of things that you say yes to as you get older. You know, the
yeah, and the creativity part of it. A lot. I say kids, but a lot of the players that I mix with, age between 18 and 25. Yeah. Who've got the chops and all that, but they're lacking the life experience and what have you. They've got it there, but they just need that moment in time to expand, and the correct moment of time. Yeah. I stopped playing with musicians my age probably about 3 or 4 years ago, because I just got fed up with the way certain people I couldn't deal with it. You know, people turning up, whether they were drunk or on other substances, or just complaining about timings of gigs and how much money they're getting paid. And I run a tight ship. I mean, my business as the Dino Baptiste empire, everything is literally, you know, everyone that I work with, they know what they're getting, what they've got to do, what's expected, etc., etc. But with the younger players, I was once told by my drummer. He said to me, Dino said, the reason why these kids really enjoy it because they want to play. They just want to get up and play. Now, if you've got players like what I've got, who are, whether they're in the academy or in Guildhall or Trinity or whatever, if they've got that passion to play, and if they've got the chops too, plus with the old way of thinking to play my kind of music, then you've nailed it. You know, I'm not very good at playing pop music. My cover set that I do for weddings and parties and stuff like that, I keep it just party classics and stuff that people are going to dance to. Do I play any like Oasis or Keen or whatever, stuff like that? No, I don't. And you know, I've just done my show reel that I've done for my band night sort of promo. I've chosen old tracks: Hit the Road Jack, Shake a Tail Feather, Ain't No Sunshine. These are tracks because it's how it's portrayed through the actual performance. You could take a song like Mustang Sally. As much as we all hate playing that song, it's how it's played. However, as I said, the creativity part, if you've got that in you to turn a simple song into a classic song, then like brilliant. And I've noticed with the younger players, if they go down that route and start playing from their heart rather than thinking about it, and that they played that note wrong or blah 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 blah, then you stand a better chance in actually kind of moving forward. Yeah, you've got you get rich quick things and all that, and getting a label signed and God knows what. I personally don't believe it. Eric Clapton wrote once in one of his books, he said, you won't get your reward until you put your graft in. Exactly. And you've got, and a lot of this lot, they don't know like what it is, you know. And I've seen some.
Yeah, because you see, I think this is again, it's not necessarily their fault particularly, but you think about the amount of how difficult it was to start. If you go back to your beginning, you know, how difficult it was to really get underway, and the fact that you were doing something else, another type of job, and and you had to take a real sort of, you know, going off to Australia to sort of trying it out. You know, you had to take a risk, and I think the biggest problem, I see this a lot, you know, where, you know, when I started off, I had I think my mother bought me the cheapest acoustic guitar in the shop because that's all she could afford, but it was brilliant. It did the job, right? And I started learning classical guitar on that. But and then the electric guitar was something that was given to me that was unplayable, that I had to rebuild. And that's normal. That was normal. That was normally what happened with people. Nobody just bought you a Gibson Les Paul. And I see this now. I get kids, I've got a couple of really good players who've got Gibsons, but it's like, my God, that was like getting a Rolls Royce.
No, I know.
It was like,
I might say
like,
big, actually.
Yeah, it's like, well, that was something you dreamt about, really.
I remember joining my first band at 16, and I had it was a Hohner pianist, which didn't even, it literally was like a guitar. You'd plug it in and the pickups acted as the power. I don't know however to explain that. And the boys in the band, they were 5 years older. They would have been, 21. They said to me, Dino, it's great stuff, man, but you can't join the band until you get a Fender Rhodes piano. Right. Now, back then, a brand new Fender Rhodes in 1981, 82 was a lot of money.
Yes.
And I hassled my mum and dad to buy me one. They said, we're not going to spend what the equivalent would have been, I don't know, $2,000.
Yeah.
The price of one of those like Nords was the price of a brand new state. But can you imagine buying a brand new Fender Rhodes that's been hand built?
Yeah.
And etc. And I ended up buying, my mum bought me a secondhand like Roland equivalent. It was what they call a suitcase piano with the big speakers underneath.
Yeah.
And but yeah, it was exactly that. And I thought, maybe if I do you remember the old Yamaha electric grands and all that stuff like that? And you always thought if you had that equipment, wow, I'm really going to be playing. That's going to make me extra special. It was a dream, and then as the years went by, the equipment.
One of this. I'll tell you a little story. Because nowadays, everybody's got a guitar tuner, right? Which is great because it means guitars are in tune, which is wonderful. But I remember buying the first guitar tuner that I think came out on the market. Probably it was a Roland one. Right?
Was it a TU-12?
Yeah, I can't remember what the code was, but it looked like a sort of transistor radio.
Yeah, I remember that, having a dial on it.
And he had it. Yeah, that's it. It had a dial on it. That's right. Yeah. And he had this thing that you could make it stand up, type of thing.
Yeah.
Right? Anyway, I went to Denmark Street. It's probably, I think we went to Rod Argent's and got this thing, right?
My favourite shop.
Yeah. And I went up with a friend of mine who was the keyboard player. And we were going to buy this together because it was so expensive.
Yeah.
Right. So we shared the cost of this guitar tuner because he could use it for his clavinet, to tune up the clavinet. And it was £105.
That's a lot of money
back in 1970. I think it was about 1976, 77.
Yeah.
And that was a lot of money. Now, of course, you can get guitar tuners free on your phone or whatever. And but yeah, 105 quid split between the two of us. But he worked out by the time he'd had his clavinet tuned a few times by a piano tuner, he would have got his money back.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's how we worked it out. But yeah, that type of thing about the costs of things.
Yeah, and when I think about it as well, like I'm about 3 years ago, I was endorsed to Roland. So you probably went when I did your blues camp shows. I don't know if you remember, I had a big black like sort of Roland.
Yeah, you did.
With an RD 700. Yeah. And after 25 years of carrying stuff in flight cases and all that, I developed a neck problem here, and I got my deal with Roland. It was called an artist liaison agreement. So you basically buy the stuff at a discount. And I had that from 2005, but 3 years ago I had this neck problem, and I just couldn't be carrying over 45 kilos of electric piano in a flight case. So I looked around and everything. I had to make some quick decisions because otherwise I'd have to stop playing. I ended up going into a Casio piano, and it did everything that I wanted to do. Yeah, I got a bit embarrassed taking it out of the case, putting it on stage, but I used that Vic for 3 years, and it saved my life. It saved my life sort of career. Having said that, after just coming out the studio with the band a few weeks ago, and I thought, now I've got to make some changes, because you make sacrifices with equipment and then you've got to. There's sort of pluses and minuses, and in this case, I just had to get back into something not. I suppose a bit more like professional, and I'm looking for a new stage piano, and I'm now looking at this like Yamaha CP88, wooden action, nice new modern samples and stuff like that. And there's me kind of thinking, yeah. And then I did actually think the other day I was driving, and I think, shit, if that was like not a few, but quite a few like years ago, I couldn't do it. I'd be thinking, where would I get the money? Either get a bank loan or borrow the money of mum and dad and pay them back.
Yeah.
So when you think at how life kind of moves on, and you're able to actually do this, and as I said, it's not a case of buying something to make you sound better. It's something that you can work with. This word, creativity.
Yeah, because I think and there must be a similar thing with piano playing.
Guitars.
But yeah, with guitars, it's all that thing like, Stevie Ray Vaughan's got the sound, right? You know where I'm going with this. I've got to get the Strat with the ridiculously heavy gated strings on it, and it's got to go through blah blah blah, whatever. And of course, you see Stevie Ray Vaughan, clips of him playing on a 12-string acoustic guitar, and he sounds like Stevie Ray Vaughan. So it doesn't actually, it's the person, it's the fingers and the player, and that must be true with.
That Casio I bought was about. The street price back then was about 750 quid. I bought it for about 900, and I made it sound as good as how it could sound, But it comes to equipment, it's a funny old thing, like really. I used to be awe-inspiring with all the latest gadgets and sitting at home, reading all the manuals, going to the music fairs, the big exhibitions at Olympia that you used to have, and coming back and thinking, I love that, I love that, I love that. I couldn't afford it. And now my equipment is literally customized to suit me, and it's what I call box friendly. So I've got everything to suit me for every particular gig. The equipment is an important part, and I've noticed with the younger players, the ones who are in it for the long haul, and actually making major careers out of their playing, whether they're playing in a pub or on a stadium. You can tell with their equipment as well, they've just got what they've got, it's personalized to them, and then they just let the playing and the experience kind of take over. Exactly. Studio work, home studio work, recording, all that kind of stuff. As you gathered, I lack a lot of technical background. I just like to turn on equipment, play it, and get on with it.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm like that. I mean, if I go back into, I built my own effects pedals once, but it's sort of kit form and all this sort of stuff. But I can't be bothered with any of that sort of stuff anymore. And I got quite early on, I got sort of bored with the anarchy type thing,
Yeah.
So it was a bit like, well, I've got this guitar, and people go, what you got? I don't know. I just wasn't interested anymore. It's about, can I get this thing to do this, or it does this, or this is nice.
What do you use at the moment? What's your amp you've got?
Well, I use Fender Blues Juniors. So I've got a few, and they're nice little amps, and they run quite hot. That's why I've got more than one, because if a valve goes, you can't. It's not like the old Marshall, you just bung another valve.
What's your guitar?
Well, I've got a few. I've got an old Strat which I use, but it's been rebuilt a couple of times, so it's sort of not quite a Strat, if you see what I mean. But I've also got a couple of ESP guitars and a couple of custom made guitars by Pete Turner. And one of them's a resonator, which is awesome because it doesn't sound like a standard resonator guitar because it's got this sort of old style acoustic feel to it.
Yeah.
But it's great for sort of jazz stuff as well. So there's that, and I've got a couple of guitars that an old Ibanez Roadster that I use for slide, which again, it's just like I picked his guitar up for virtually nothing.
But you've basically got your gear now.
Yeah.
That will last you now.
Yeah, because I don't, I've never owned a Les Paul. I've played a Les Paul a couple of times in the studio, but
Sure.
I've never owned one. They're too heavy, as far as I'm concerned. They just weigh a ton, So a Strat has always been the most versatile instrument for me. It's just easy to get.
I'm a sucker for Telecaster, mate. I think it's the most. It's such. If I was a guitarist, it's got that James Dean kind of. Do you know? I can't explain it. It's got that. It's just.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
It's the lines of a Tele.
Yeah,
I just love that straight line.
One of the custom guitars I've got is a Tele.
Yeah,
but
love it.
Actually, it's more punchy because the Telecaster's got a particular sound, which is a great sound. But I was always playing. In the early days, I was doing this sort of hybrid stuff, a lot of reggae.
Love reggae.
Yeah, and the thing is with reggae, a Strat is just like you can go from that into something, and you could do a sort of 180-degree turn and be able to do a Hendrix thing, and and do the reggae thing, and then some sort of jazz thing with no problems. Where
you know what, Vic, I've just actually done a cover on that. The recording I told you that I did 7 tracks. One of them was Ken Booth's "Everything I Own," and we did a great but I've put a lot of that, sort of Decca Records ska Hammond organ.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it, man. I love ska. I'm a real massive fan of ska. Yeah. And just only the other day on my birthday, I had some crazy pictures on there, and I put on one of my stories. I put in Sam Sham and the Pharaohs, Bully Bully. Yeah, I love that. I love that track.
Yeah,
great sort of number. I'm a real massive fan of Hammond organ as well. I haven't mastered it like some of the players. I don't play like sort of pedals and stuff like that, but that is another genre of music. I just love all that Jimmy Smith.
We see that's the thing, because there's obviously a lot of really hot guitar players come via that sort of thing. People working with,
because
from people like that. So you got George Benson's a good example.
Yeah,
and Grant Green, the jazz guitar player. I mean, and it's got. And their guitar style really fitted that Hammond.
Oh, mate, and they didn't have like sort of bass players. So again, I play the majority of my work only without the band. It's always been like sort of left-hand bass. People say to me, Dino, like, how come you haven't got a bass player? And for 15 years, I split the keyboard down. I have to sort of tailor the whole PA system and everything for this left-hand bass, but keyboard bass is completely different to having a bass player. There's good like plus and minus points there, but the Hammond trios, when it was just Hammond drums and guitar or sax, it's brilliant. But what you said with all those, if you're playing in a Hammond organ trio, your guitar playing is completely different.
Oh, it's completely different, totally different. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in actual fact, I would say there's a similar sort of thing about if you're working with a horn section as a guitarist, because they're doing a lot of the work, right? And it's same with the Hammond, that's doing a lot of the work, and you just have to.
Well, it's a palette of sound. Yeah,
you have to ride on it. Yeah. Again, that's another thing. But I mean, how would you teach that in a college course?
This is it. You know what?
It's all about sound and feel, right?
Well, I was saying to Dom and Tom, the guitarist and sax player, that's like Guildhall and Academy. I said, do you guys actually listen to your like lecturers and your teachers and all that? And they kind of looked at me. They said, well, sometimes. I said, and do you get like told off if you're not kind of following, because they're there for your benefit. You're paying all those fees to go to these elaborate colleges and like academies and all that, but a lot of these places, which is good, they let them do their thing. If they make a mistake, they let them solve that mistake without even saying anything, and then they learn, I should have done it that way. And that whole thing about how do you teach them, as far as I'm concerned, mate, I'm a firm believer that nothing's going to improve or give you scope until you're on stage and you're dropped in it.
Exactly.
You know, and
Exactly.
you know, I can't take the solo there because it's. Oh, no. I said, get on and just play.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know? And if you screw it up, then fine.
The interesting thing here is you're talking about, what you're talking about there. I always sort of, I always come at music from the point of view, it's a language, right? And then obviously certain genres have certain linguistic things that go on, like you're talking about reggae, how does that all fit together? And, how does the rhythm guitar work with the drums and the bass, and where's the bass in the sound, and where's the, and when you sort of talk to kids or anybody who's learning and say, look, if you look at that, and then you look at rock music and how that's sort of structured, and that the bass is, the guitar is lower in the sound with the bass, whereas in reggae there's a bigger, the guitar's higher up and all the rest of it, and you get that sort of feel. Well, that's like the syntax of language, and it's once you just get your head around that, that's just like just communicating. So once you've got it, and then the music starts to talk to you, and that's when people get that, they can get to the way that the music functions really quickly. But it wouldn't take, you would, as a college course, you wouldn't be writing an awful lot of course notes with that, because it's a bit like, well, just have a listen, and this is basically what's going on, and then talk to one another, which is basically what goes on in sort of like Indian music. It's all about communication. What's the tabla player saying, and what's the sitar player going to now, in answer to that, play? And I think what you're sort of saying about, just get out there, play, listen, play, and if something's not quite right, what happened, just because
it's quite weird actually at these gigs. They come up to us and they say, hey, it's, Dino, it's amazing how these guys are playing in the band and all that. You must have done like lots of rehearsals. I said, no, mate. No. The bass player there, he's only done 3 gigs like sort of with me. And it's only because, regardless of the age, they're feeling it. They're looking. You've got to have the natural ability built into you. There's no denying that.
Yeah.
Right. If you've got the chops, then you've got the chops. If you haven't, and you'll know if you're good or not, as you said like earlier on, because you won't get booked again to do another gig.
No, exactly.
As such, but I'm a firm believer, Vic, that if I had, as I said, if I had a kid who wanted to learn, I'd say, right, get out there, get on stage and play. And if you come back and say, oh, Dad, I had a really bad gig or something, well, do the next one and pick up the pieces like after that. We all learned that way. There's so many aspects to this, and really sidetracking, when you go back to what we've been through in COVID, and certain members of our government who've said, don't worry about that lot, they can retrain for
yes,
for
I know.
a job,
I know.
Don't even start me on that, because people don't like understand, I remember, and I'm not embarrassed to actually say this, I've actually calmed down with my driving skills, but a couple of times I broke the law in speeding, had points on my driving license, had to go to a magistrate's court, and I'm not joking, Vic. There I was giving my whole case, explaining what I did as a musician, proving my sort of mitigation that I needed my license to get to gigs. And the judge was just like, she was sitting in there and she was just literally enthralled about the whole aspect of gigs and what you do and this, that, and the other. And I actually won both cases, and I kept my license. But my point is that it's a different world, and like no one seems to understand where. And look, let's not, people who are sort of listening to this as well, that it's not just about Dino and his piano. We've got lighting, sound, riggers, people who, everything, roadies, the whole lot. There's a whole lot of people who've been left behind. But the musicians, which on the face of things, that's what the general public tends to. They don't know about backline crew and stuff like that, who've probably lost their homes, who haven't got a penny to their name because they've spent it on trying to live over the past like 12 months, self-employment grants, blah, 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 blah. It's another world out there. And there is a lot of like added material to being a working professional musician or involved in the entertainment, not even in the entertainment industry, the arts industry.
Yes.
You know, there's so much. I mean, think about all the stuff at the Albert Hall, like classical like musicians, your flautists, your trombone, your trumpet and sax, you know, who are relying on just group or orchestral work, not playing a flute or a clarinet in a pub gig, because that's quite rare.
I know, and again, this is what you're saying about all the other people involved in the arts. You know, as you say, sound, you know, sound crews, lighting crews, all that sort of stuff.
So many of them.
It's just, yeah, and a lot of these companies have gone bust and things, and they've been sold not down the river with this, and also the Brexit stuff and all the rest of it.
And it even goes down to like sort of merchandise. And imagine all those people who printed the T-shirts and all that stuff. You could split it down into 100 different fine lines, you know. Like ultimately, though, as far as the what I call the professional like music scene, be it classical, contemporary, pop, blues, rock, jazz, etc. I suppose the face of it is us lot, the performers. But beyond that, there's a lot to remember. And I personally have said it every gig that I've done during COVID, the ones where I was allowed to play. And I don't care whether it takes 5-10 minutes of my stage time in front of a full house, which is not a full house these days. I always give praise to all the working staff, you know. And then again, if you backtrack more into every form of the arts, acting, dancing, poetry, you name it, the whole cultural thing in the UK, we've got, I think the next 6 months are going to be really, really pivotal. People are saying that, I've always said actually, the trigger point is when Glastonbury gets the go-ahead for its full-on thing, then you know that we're pretty much on there. I know that Reading and Leeds are running in August. On what capacity, I've got sort of no idea. I think like Glastonbury is a really good like marker. You know, if you've got 200,000 plus people who are turning up to a regular festival over 3 days with no problem whatsoever, and hopefully with COVID restrictions, masks and distancing and all that, fine. But to be back to normal, the 6 months are going to be really, really kind of pivotal for us as working musicians within the art industry. I think probably from October into November is when we'll know if we're going to get the bulk of that, you know, that revenue back to us, Christmas parties, etc., etc. And by the time we get to spring of next year, through another winter, what that's is going to bring us, I've got no idea. Hopefully we'll be on track for summer. There's a lot of hope, and there's a lot of optimism. And you need that optimism. One thing that I was very careful about as well on my social media during like COVID, I did never put anything negative on there. I sometimes would put pictures of me playing a gig from 3 years ago saying, that's what I want to do, I wish I was there. But I never, ever put negativity on social media, because we're all going through the same thing.
Yes.
And like Dana Gillespie always said to me, she says it to this day, Dino, less is more. And I'm a firm sort of believer of that, you know. The future's bright, it is there, just that we've had a kick in the teeth. And it wasn't a world war.
No, exactly. This is the point.
You know,
we've got to get this stuff into perspective, haven't we?
A world war, I mean, how long, you know, imagine World War One, like World War Two, 1939 to 1945. In 12 months, we've been, yes, rest in peace to all those loving people that have gone. But we've been through 12 months. We've got a vaccine, which is unheard of. The pros and cons and all the conspiracy things, I don't even want to know about that. I'm just going with what my intuition tells me, what I'm told to do, what I want to do, and if I want to actually do it in terms of my health, and looking after my family and friends. But I think there is a little bit more of a long haul to go, but I think by the end of this year, we'll know exactly like where we are. I've got timelines in my head, government timelines, and my own sort of Dino like timelines. Whether that falls into place, I don't know. The main thing is obviously that I can pay the bloody bills at the end of the month, which is a good thing. And you know, I must admit, for the people who fell between the cracks, Vic, with their money and all that, I do feel really sorry for, and I'm always like aware of that. And you know, I've had good support from the musicians union, and they're aware of it like as well. Touch wood, and thankfully I didn't fall between the cracks, you know, and I prepared for this with just with my income and paying my taxes and everything like that, you know. So I knew, I had no idea that the government was going to provide self-employment grants and stuff like that. But it's been put in place. I followed protocol, and hopefully by the end of June, we might see light at the end of the tunnel. Whether we exit or not, it's too early to say.
Yeah. All right. Well, on that note, mate, that's really good. So now, if you send me some details, and I'll put them in the show notes, because whenever I listen to podcasts, I never pick up, you know, website addresses or anything. So send me the details, and I'll get them in the show notes if people want to contact you. And
so what? Just put my website and my email.
Yeah. Just send me the stuff, and I'll put them up in
because with my like website, whilst the gig guide is like that, the whole Dino Baptiste empire is on there.
Yeah, because you're on Instagram, you said, didn't you? So
Instagram, on Facebook. I mean, there's only one Dino Baptiste piano player on Facebook. That's myself. Instagram as well. But the next positive thing, just before we cut off, is I've just finally I'm trying to push my 5-piece band. It was about time that I could do this, whether it's for private work or for like blues festivals and stuff. But Night Train, which I've named the band. We were in the studio. 7 library tracks. We've taken the 7 tracks and condensed that into 3.5 minutes as a show reel. So hopefully within the next 24, 48 hours, the project's been just gone over a month now, but I'll have that all kind of set up, and that will be on my social media too.
Cool. All right, that's great. Good. Yeah,
mate, I've enjoyed every moment. I hope you've enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's good. Good to see you again.
I think we should just keep music live and just get it out there, man.
Totally, absolutely. So
great.
All right. I'll speak to you soon, mate.
Thanks, Mick. All the best, mate.
Yeah. So it's another musician waiting for lockdown and all the rest of it to finish to get out and play again. If you ever get a chance to see Dino, he is really amazing. Details on the show notes. Also, you know, if you want to support the show, hop over to our Patreon. Links again in the show notes. So until next time, see you then.